Hello everybody, and good afternoon. I'm standing here once again in front of the camera to tell you my opinions, so take it with a grain of salt. But this particular opinion, I guess, wouldn't really be an opinion, but rather a statement of trying to convey the idea that we all have the strength within us to conquer anything and to tackle anything we find is important in our lives, if we so have the dedication and will. So I'm going to go into that a little bit. Well, first off, wanted to start off by saying it seems like everybody out there is always either trying to tell you how you can be happy, or they're trying to tell you why you shouldn't be happy. There are many people that I've heard from very spiritual sites saying that everyone needs to just learn how to be happy, and I myself agree with that to an extent. I understand mental alchemy, converting thoughts that are negative into positive ones, but not everybody can do that. So it's just like telling somebody, you're swinging a hammer, you're building a house, and somebody's like, just build a cabinet. It's something that you have to have practice to do. You have to understand, and you have to be shown. So you have to take somebody by the hand and explain to them how every time they have a negative thought, you have to kick it in the ass and turn it around. So the way that people on the opposite end of the spectrum behave is a little bit disconcerting. We have people who are telling us to always be happy, but then we have people who will dismiss someone for being happy, saying, oh, it must be nice. It must be nice that you're happy when the world's going to shit. Well, some people are broke and some people are poor, so you should be suffering and miserable too. So we know we can't take either one of those approaches. If you try to be miserable all the time, well, sure, that's an easy way out, because basically people can always have something to complain about, and they get fed by people who are saying, oh, it's all right, and consoling them, and sure, we all know somebody who's a whiner. But on the other hand, there's always the person who's super positive too, and never seems to let anything get to them. And they're the kind of person that might be like twitching and waiting to explode inside, because we as humans have to speak our minds and be straight up. So let's take a realistic approach to this. Instead of saying, just be happy, let's try to explain exactly why a person can think more positively about their lives and try to help each other to do that. Now, I'm not, I feel like I'm repeating myself because a lot of the videos I talk about the same subject, but it's because I find it to be the most important subject. People talk about politics, they talk about religion, they talk about various issues with gay rights, racial discrimination. I mean, you could go on and on. All of these are based upon the way a person feels inside, or the lack of a proper understanding of the world around them. If a person believes that everyone has the right to equality and equal treatment, regardless of their race or their religion, then they can go about their lives without judging people right away. You get to know people and you find out that people are pretty good. It doesn't matter really where they come from, or the only reason that seems to be an issue is because, especially in America, where it's easy for people to be racist against, let's say, blacks, because there's a lot of crime in black communities. But of course, if you look back historically, using education, you start to understand why this happened. Because the crack entered the cities in the 80s, the cocaine and crack. Many of the fathers got shot and went to prison. Many of the children were raised to fend for themselves with just their moms, and that's why all the rappers talk about their mamas and, always had dad issues. I'm not talking about everyone. I'm not generalizing everyone. I'm saying this is an issue that really happened. This is something that's happening now in places like Chicago, where there are entire blocks and neighborhoods that have no male role models. So, role models are very important, obviously, because if we don't have somebody to look up to, and we don't have somebody to respect, then how can we expect anybody to want to impress anybody? In other words, if you've been told nothing all your life except for, oh, well, you live in a bad part of town, you're probably not going to be able to get a job, you're probably going to fail, well, that's what you're going to think. And you're going to give up, and you're going to start selling drugs or do whatever you can to survive. And that's going to become your way of life. So here we have a gangster who's shooting people and selling drugs, and people just hate him for it. But I don't, because I understand why he's in the position he's in. Many cultures and many religions in other countries that have issues going on that we don't understand, and our xenophobia causes us to not want to understand it. It's just, throw a bomb in the Middle East. You start to ask people questions about these things and say, well, what do you mean by the Middle East? Which country? Do you even understand that there are several areas within the Middle East and several different countries? In fact, many of the areas of Iraq are full. Iran, there are Kurds up there that are basically freedom fighters that have nothing against the U.S., but here we are in conflict, and we throw everybody under the bus because of our lack of knowledge, our lack of understanding. And why is that? Why do we have a lack of understanding? Well, this is where it kind of comes to a division in people. A lot of people would say it's them. It's the Illuminati. It's some sort of the schooling system, the education system. All of this is a huge part. The people would like folks to be dumbed down and just work. And there aren't many people who do. But you can't say that every politician and every business executive and every rich man wants everybody else to be poor and looked down upon. It's not that way. It's just that they assume, and I saw a perfect flowchart for it. It was a bird's sitting on the top of, on a perch. I just saw this today. And then there were 4 birds below him and 8 birds below them. And the shit, of course, on the heads of the birds below him. And the top it went, owners, management, executives, and then down to, the rest of us is what it was. And it says, this is the perfect flowchart to explain how the economy works. The guys from the top look down and all they see are heads. The guys from the bottom look up and all they see are assholes. And that's it. Or, sorry, they look down and all they see is shit. And the guys' heads is, that's kind of extreme difference there. The point being is that many of the people who are on the bottom feel like it's the problem. The problem is the people who are rich, the people who own businesses. So we get into this issue about free market. People start arguing about capitalism. And then we start fighting about that. And then people get really upset. And this is why this is important to me, because people get really upset about where they're at in life. They've been let down. They've been disillusioned. They feel like the system is completely against them. But they're not looking back at times like the Depression, when there was real suffering going on. And many people are taking a totally wrong approach to, say, the country that we live in. I've seen it in this election, people think that, let's say, my country, the USA, is going down the tubes. They say that it's just falling apart and we're destroyed, and look at this debt, and look how high this debt is. And the debt goes up and down. The debt moves all around, but what is important is, are we taking care of our own in the country? When people argue, well, we could go out and we can build this wall and we can fight these wars and we need to attack terrorists and do all this, I say, but what about the people at home? But then there's also the aspect of, well, we can't just throw money at people. We can't just give all our tax money to people who are poor just because they're poor. And then people start to argue, well, they don't work hard enough. They don't look for jobs. And then the other side argues, well, there's not enough jobs where they're at. And their economy is crumbling, and they live in Chicago, and there's no more jobs. And what I'm trying to say with all these things is that tolerance is a really important issue here. I should say empathy more than tolerance. And you can empathize with people by just putting yourself in their shoes. It seems like something that's so simple, and it is. But to really put yourself in a person's shoes doesn't mean just say, what would it be like to be a coal miner? Or what would it be like to be a gangster in the inner city? But run through an entire daily life of that person. The fears, the anxieties, waking up in the morning, the stress of wondering if you're going to get either shot or lose your career, lose your job, whatever your position is. Everyone has something different that they're worried about. So when we get past trying to pretend like we're all tough and let your little barrier be chipped away a little bit, and allow people that you love and those around you, and even people you don't know, to point out your flaws in ways that you can grow, that means that you're not opened up to any fear of ridicule anymore. Like a person could throw a million insults at me, and I've heard them all at this point. There's a time in my life where I would argue against it, and I may stand up for myself, but there's a big difference between standing up for yourself and being actually offended by it, or trying to, prove that you're not what a person says. By letting other people's opinions go, you're free to be yourself. When you are yourself, you're free to use your energy for better things, such as turning around your way of thinking. So this whole video, I guess, has been a long way of saying that if there's any hope for the future, it's not going to be through dropping bombs. It's not going to be through building walls. It's not going to be through regulations and heavy taxing. And it's not going to be through abolishment of government or taxing. We are political creatures, like Aristotle said, by nature. We desire to debate, we desire to create, we desire to excel and to move forward. And while many people have no desire to climb and no desire to produce anything, they're irrelevant to all the people who do. One human could say, we need to go back to the old ways. We could go back to nature. We need to go back to the way things were. It's a great notion, but it's like a utopia. It's like saying, I want to go back to the simple way of life because it was simple and it makes life easier. Regardless of why a person wants that, it's not going to happen. The only way the simple life is going to return is through millions of years. If tomorrow an EMP, a nuclear strike, a meteor, solar flare, you name it, whatever, if something took out the world grid, if infrastructure went down, we wouldn't be going back to the old ways. We would be using technologically advanced stuff that we've already created to try to kind of rebuild a small, semblance of what we once had, but realize at the same time where our faults were and our follies. My hope is that it doesn't have to get to that point. And I know that in the future, humanity will probably have to go through some tough times. I've always had the belief that we're going to suffer through some sort of a cataclysm in my life. It started when I was a teenager, and I talked to some older people about it, and they just kind of shake and nodded their heads and knew what I was talking about. And I've always said I have this vibe, just something's coming. And so now I still hear this from kids. They'll say, oh, I just know something's going to happen. And I say, I've been feeling that for a long time. It might just be the anxiety of being human, something that we all share. And some people may believe that something's going to happen to the world. Other people may take that anxiety and misplace it and think that something bad's going to happen to them and develop some sort of a fear of dying. Some people may be afraid that something's going to happen to their loved ones and they become overly protective. Let me just say that I mean we're all worried, okay? And setting that worry aside means letting the things go that once bothered us. And it's easier said than done. So when you look around at people, friends and family, remember they're trying their best. And if they're not trying their best, then the only way to encourage them to do so is going to be to try to explain calmly to them that they can be happier. And that's what I want to leave on. Never tell people how they should live. Try never to tell people what they should do. I have to bite my tongue when I see people that are doing things that are against their own best interest. But through my education of understanding and putting myself in other people's shoes, I realize not only do they have to learn that for themselves, but their experience with it may be different than mine. It's like if somebody tries a bad food once and they're like, oh, that's nasty, don't try it, Or they have a bad experience on a vacation and they say, oh, this place sucks. Hey, to each his own. You got to go out and get your feet wet in any way you can and test everything you can as an individual. And I believe that through testing the waters, through learning as much as you can about yourself and the world, by researching life in general, and by getting a well-rounded view, and being able to communicate with people well, which is a major important part, and then loving yourself and your family and having people around you that are a support group, that's how you're truly happy. So remember that some people don't have support group. Some people go home and they're lonely. Some people go home and don't have anybody to talk to or anybody to bounce ideas off. And perhaps that person goes on the internet and decides that they're going to ask for a little bit of assistance through YouTube, maybe talk and see if anybody else has had this same problem. And then along comes Joe Blow saying, oh, you're just an idiot, you're a weakling, you need to toughen up. Just remember, everybody's got their own shit, all right? And it all stinks. But, we can walk away smelling like roses if we really want to. Ultimately, you got to look back at every day and laugh and just live. Just live. And another point I wanted to make, it's hot in here. Whew, it's a hot day outside, the first hot day of spring. When I started this video, originally I wanted to say something really simple, which was be able to walk away from anything at any time. Don't be afraid to lose a job, don't be afraid to lose a hobby, and don't be afraid to lose interest in something you once had a passion for. If you went to college for 4 years and you've lost a passion for what you're doing, it's time to move on. It's not 4 years wasted, it's 4 years learning something. It's 4 years experiencing how not to waste 4 years, or to be a little more cautious in the future. But don't trap yourself into something you're miserable with merely because you think you have to. And I think that that's a major component of happiness. You are an individual. And just remember, if you're a parent or a child, whatever, whoever you're obligated to, parents or your kids or your friends or family, you're still obligated to yourself. You still have to live a life. And you're still going to eventually have to answer to yourself whatever decision you make. So whether you give yourself away or hold yourself completely back, in the end, you're going to have to come full circle to the middle. A little bit of a balance between yourself and others. So that's all I got, and hope you all